Hey there everyone, I'm Varsha and I like to read quite a lot. And these past 2 months I have managed to read a sum total of 18 books, which is actually way out of the ordinary for me. I read maybe half that amount, usually bi-monthly, but this time I managed to read way more, and I just wanted to share all the books that I've read in these past 2 months with you. And for that, I have the help of my trusty reading journal because I have forgotten a lot of things from these books that I've read, especially the ones I read in March. And so I will be referring to this little book from time to time to help jog my memory a bit. But other than that, everything else is gonna be from my own brain, fried as it is from the summer heat. And so if you see me perspiring quite a bit, it's because it's literally 36 degrees in here. I am actually dying, and I can't even switch on the fan because that would interrupt the audio quality. So I hope that my suffering is at least worth your while as I talk about a bunch of really brilliant books that I've read and also some duds here and there, but that is to be expected after all. But without any further ado, let's get right into the books that I've read in March and April. So starting chronologically from March, the first book that I read was The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. Now, fantasy fans amongst you would most definitely have heard of A Darker Shade of Magic, that really popular trilogy by the same author. And this is basically a spin-off work set in the same universe. So in that story, we basically have 4 parallel Londons existing side by side in these kind of alternate dimensions. And there are special magic users called Antari who are basically blood magicians, and they can use their blood to do a bunch of different things, including being the only people who can traverse between these alternate Londons. And in the first book, we follow 2 characters, Kell and Lila. Kell, who is from Red London, which is like the most magic heavy place, and Lila from Grey London, which is just regular England's capital during the 19th century. There is no magic there. And they collide one day in Grey London, and then an adventure ensues, and there's a lot of saving the world and really crazy stuff going on, monsters to defeat, the usual in a fantasy series. And this book follows right where the third book ends, and we have a cast of new characters who added a lot to the story because I hated most of the main cast in A Darker Shade of Magic. I really don't like that series, but this was more tolerable because we didn't have to spend as much time with the usual cast, though they were there, especially Lila, who is among my top 3 most insufferable characters ever. And other than that, this was just a nice way to return back to a familiar world, though I don't really like it that much, the world in general. It was alright, I guess. I gave it 3.5 stars because Lila was still there and she wouldn't shut up. But other than that, I wouldn't suggest this to be your entry point into the world because you will be confused. I guess you can read it, it spoils all of the first trilogy. But yeah, if this sounds interesting to you, then certainly check out A Darker Shade of Magic. That's probably a reason it's popular, though I can't see why. But yeah, that's that for the first book. I'm trying to keep my reviews short here because I cannot talk succinctly to save my life, especially about books. And if I don't learn to do that, we're going to be here for a long, long time. And now moving on to the next books that I read, because these aren't the only ones. As you can see, there are not 18 of them. I do read quite a lot digitally, and half of the books that I read these 2 months were digital books. And these next 3 books are all digital reads in the same series, and that is Lockwood & Co., a really famous, I guess it used to be, in the middle grade circles it is. It is a middle grade fantasy, horror, paranormal fiction series, and there is a Netflix adaptation which is really excellent. And the reason I read these books is because I wanted to watch the adaptation, and I like to read the original material before watching adaptations. And it was really the best way to go because it's so fun to spot all of the little differences that they do in the TV show, sometimes really major ones, but I think reading them side by side really enhanced my experience of consuming the story. And basically, we are set in London in 2012, I guess, whenever the books are released. So at that time, but in this world, there are now hauntings and spirits and ghosts and all kinds of supernatural phenomena are going on. And the main character, Lucy, comes from, I guess, a sleepy village somewhere in the English countryside, and she used to work in these agencies who employ children because they're the only ones who can see these supernatural phenomena, and they are essentially agents who have to like get to the source of the haunting, destroy it so that these malignant spirits would not attack regular people. And so she is kind of down on her luck, and she has moved to London, and she's not having a great time finding new employment. But one day she sees an advertisement for a walk-in interview at this agency, which kind of looks shady, but that's her only hope. So she goes there and figures out that it's run by two other children just like her, no adult supervisors, and that is Lockwood and Co, the agency. And she, well, joins them because she passes the test, and we follow her and the other two agents, Lockwood and George, as they three go about London and I guess other places in England too, solving all of these paranormal mysteries, investigating what's going on, destroying ghosts, and taking on a bunch of cases. And it's just a really fun middle grade series that is also actually terrifying. Like, I was reading it on my phone in bed right before I go to sleep, and I actually couldn't sleep for quite a while because it did spook me. And I guess I am a scaredy cat if middle grade series can spook me. I don't consume a lot of horror, especially books. I don't read very many horror books, so this was an interesting time. All of the books that I read in the series so far, so I've read book 1, The Screaming Staircase, book 2, which is The Whispering Skull, and then in between those two, there's like a short story called The Dagger in the Desk, and all three of them were 5 stars from me. Just excellent books. And if you read middle grade, or if you're looking to start out in the horror genre, but you are a scaredy cat, I mean, if you really can't handle horror, I don't think this is for you. But if you want to get into it, then I would suggest starting out with kiddie horror, I guess. And I would definitely recommend Lockwood and Co. I love middle grade, so the age isn't a problem for me, but yeah, just give it a go regardless. Like, it's just so fun. And obviously, what's a Netflix adaptation? It's pretty excellent too. After that, I read another book digitally, which is Immortal by Su Lin Tan. And that is a new release by the author, which came out in January this year. And last year, I had read her more famous duology, The Daughter of the Moon Goddess. And I really loved those two books. And there was also a short story collection. I really enjoyed them. It was so incredible. The author writes like beautiful descriptions, and her prose has a kind of formal quality to it, but I think it really aids in building the atmosphere, and I really enjoyed that. That was like a 4.5 series for me. I hated the love triangle because I hate love triangles regardless of how well they're done. I can't comment on that, but yeah, the book itself, the plot, everything was done so well. And so I was so excited to read Immortal because it's her newest release, and from the premise, it sounded so cool. And here's how it goes. So we follow our main character, Leon, who is the heir to the throne of this human kingdom. So she's human, unlike the Daughter of the Moon Goddess, where all the characters were immortal. But yeah, she's human, and when her grandfather, who's the current ruler, dies unexpectedly, then she has to ascend to the throne, and at the same time she has to contend with the immortal realm above, who are trying to gain control of her kingdom. Well, they have a treaty with the immortals that as long as they keep some of the rules, then the immortals will help them against these other kinds of creatures that roam their borders. But yeah, it's weird. Like, she wants freedom for her people because they live in this like enclosed, walled kind of, not city, this walled kingdom. They can't go out. So she's trying to renegotiate the treaty so that they can be open to the rest of the human world. And that's not going too well. So her plans to liberate her people from like the immortal ruler, I think her name is Queen Taihong, aren't going well. And so she's summoned to the immortal realm to like renew the treaty, and then she encounters the very mysterious god of war, and she hates him on principle because yeah, he's an immortal, but then like their fates become entangled, and then politics happens and stuff. Like, I'm not doing a very good job of explaining the premise. I really should read up my summaries before I open my mouth. But yeah, so then they have to team up, like the humans and the immortals, because there's another like third power who's threatening all of them. But yeah, it sounded cool, okay? I'm not making it sound very cool, but I swear it is. And I was really excited for it, but then within the first 5%, I hated the main character. She got on my nerves so much. She has severe, like, I don't know, pick me energy. Not like the other girls. There aren't any other girls for her to compare herself to. But yeah, she was annoying, and the relationship that she has with the God of War is just so tropey and weird. Like, I swear, the first sentence that comes out of the God of War's mouth to her is, "Who did this to you?" Like, can you believe that? But yeah, I mean, in the scene, it makes sense, but that's how cringe it was. It was so just, I did not like it. The plot was alright. I liked seeing more of the immortal realm. So the place that she goes to, the immortals that govern her, are those of the Golden Desert, and that's the one place that wasn't explored in the previous duology. So we got to see a bit more of that, not much. Then we got to go to other places too, like the underworld, and it was just, the atmosphere was still great. The writing is impeccable, but it was wasted on a main like relationship like this, and some of the plot elements were also kind of weird, and I feel like this read like a first draft rather than a completed book, and I think the author wanted to write a different story, but then the editors or the publishers pushed her to write something else that would appeal to the romantasy crazed audience that is there these days. Like, I swear the publishing industry is a mess, and this book seems like the result of that gone wrong. Like, because she was so successful with her first book, the publishers wanted to milk her for all she's worth and made her write this slop. So yeah, I did not like this, but I would still give it 3.5 stars because I like the author's writing, I like the world, I just didn't like this particular thing. So yeah, I mean, check it out if you like the author, or maybe not, because that will tarnish your view of her. But it's all right. Daughter of the Moon Goddess was better. This one disappointed me. Okay, maybe you like it if you like the typical romantasy dynamic, I guess. But yeah, that's that for this one. Speaking of romantasy, I read the extremely popular ACOTAR, A Coat of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And I know, like, why did I do that? Because I wanted to see what all the hype was about. The hype is nearly a decade old at this point, but I still wanted to check it out. I started reading it as a buddy read with my friend, and then he gave up, I think, but then I still persevered on. I started reading it last year and finally completed it this March. And it was all right. It wasn't as horrible or deplorable as I was expecting it. I admit I was very prejudiced about it. But it's basically Beauty and the Beast retelling. That's how it's marketed. Our main character, Feyre, is a mortal, and the world that she lives in, it's divided into the fairy realm, which takes up most of the island that there. It's a big island. Like, it's shaped like England, really, actually. And she lives in the southern part where the humans live, and there's a wall separating them from the fairy realm of Prithian. But one day she's out in the woods trying to feed her family during like the really harsh winter, and she kills a wolf, except the wolf was actually a fairy in disguise. and then she has violated the terms of the treaty between the Fae and the humans, and a person, a Fae, comes to collect her from her home and take her to Prithian as penance for her crime. And then she's brought to this like huge manor, and she's basically imprisoned there. Not really, she has free will, but she can't go back home without endangering her family. So she lives there, and the person who takes her back is the male love interest, Tamlin. And yeah, from his name, there's also a bit of the Tamlin fairy tale retelling going on towards the end. I won't explain that part because that would be a spoiler, but yeah, there's that too. And it was fine. It was interesting. It was very like readable. It just flew by so quickly. I liked the fairy tale atmosphere to it. I really loved the descriptions of Prithian as this like really wild and terrifying place. I liked all the weird monsters there. Like I really like reading about monsters that are out to eat and kill people. I don't know why. It's a thing, okay? I enjoyed that. What I didn't like, so we have the secondary love interest, recent, the one who, if you are on Book Talk, you'll see like a million TikToks about him and Feyre, and I don't know, man. He was so icky and gross, and I hated him. And being on social media long enough, I know how it gets resolved, and I hate how the love triangle ends because, like, why wouldn't you pick the better option who's literally right there? A recent was a slimy sleazeball, and I hated him. There were some parts in the book, like at the 70 to 80% mark, where it was like borderline essay between him and Feyre, and I'm like, why are people romanticizing this? This is actually criminal behavior, but whatever. It was gross, weird, that section. But overall, rating my enjoyment of the book, I would give it 3.75 stars. And I will continue with the series. Even though this book ended very satisfactorily, you can just stop here. It ends like with a conclusive note to it, but there's obviously gonna be more. So yeah, you can read on ahead, try the series out just to see where the whole romantasy trend kind of began, because this is one of the OG ones, right? And after that, I continued reading mostly middle grade books for the rest of March because I was trying to properly commemorate middle grade March. And as I've mentioned, I love middle grade, so why wouldn't I dedicate an entire month to reading books like that? The three ones that I mentioned, which were decidedly not middle grade, they were basically carryovers from the month of February, so I didn't start them in March. I just needed to complete them. These ones that I did start and complete in March, some more of them. All right, let's go. The next one that I read was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. I hope that's how you pronounce her surname. But yes, this is a very, very famous classic work of middle grade fiction. It is sci-fi, and it's like insanely popular. Like, it's on reading lists in schools, and most people have probably read it in their childhood. I guess not here in India, but like in the Western world, it is very popular. And I hadn't read it yet, and I wanted to see why it is considered a cornerstone of middle grade fiction. And this is my brother's copy. He had it from school for assigned reading. But yeah, I picked it up, and it was very disappointing. I did not like this. So in this book, we follow Meg along with her younger brother Charles and their friend Calvin, and they're whisked through space by these three mysterious women that they meet in a creepy house near the woods or something like that, in order to rescue their father, who has been missing for the past 5 or 6 years. And I did like the aspect of the time travel or like space travel in this being based on actual science. So the concept of this wrinkle in time in this book, it's called tesseracting, no, tessering, and these wrinkles are tesseracts, I think. So it's really basically wormholes. Okay, the concept of this book is wormholes. You tunnel through space and time and you end up in alternate dimensions, really. And I liked that part, but the rest of it, the writing, it was, I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. It was very like sparse and weird, and the main character is unlikable, but that's important to her personality, and she does undergo a bit of character growth throughout. Not a lot, but it happens. There was just something about it that didn't sit right with me. Also had a lot of very overt Christian themes to it, which weren't really my favorite because I don't like being bludgeoned over my head with like extreme Catholic themes. It's not like the Chronicles of Narnia, which apparently has Christian themes, but I didn't notice it when I was reading. But this, it's like super obvious. I did like the inclusion of neurodivergent characters. So Meg is neurodivergent, and Charles, her brother, is definitely autistic. And there's a lot of commentary on them being viewed as different, but how being different doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. So they are both being reassured by various characters, including their parents, that it's good to be different because it's important to be yourself and not change yourself just to fit into what other people want you to be. So I like that theme of it, but other than that, this was a kind of mediocre read. It definitely read of its time, it reads like an old classic, I guess. And yeah, I gave it 3 stars because I did like some of the things in it. I just didn't really enjoy it very much, and I will not be continuing on with the series. I think there's 5 books in total, but yeah, that's A Wrinkle in Time. After that, I read this small essay by Catherine Rundell, who is like a very famous children's author, and it's called Why You Should Read Children's Books Even Though You Are So Old and Wise. And it is not exactly a middle grade essay, it is geared towards adults. It still, definitely pertains to the theme of reading middle grade fiction, reading children's fiction, and the themes that are explored in the essay, what it talks about, are stuff that I very firmly believe in, and it was just nice to read a very masterful author articulate my feelings regarding this so much better than I ever could. And it was just a very insightful read, and I would highly recommend that everyone checks it out, especially people who have a lot of contempt for children's books, or even contempt towards people who read children's books, because I think I have gotten that at certain points in my life, even when I was a child. Like, I just turned 18. I don't think that I'm too old for children's books. No one really is. But even when I was in like high school, people would be like, why do you read middle grade so much? Isn't it immature and childish? And I'm like, it's not. First of all, middle grade is so much more fun than the current slop that the publishing industry pushes out in like YA and adult fantasy, because fantasy is a genre I read the most. So yeah, speaking about that. But yeah, I think just check out this essay. It's absolutely brilliant. And I will be checking out other works of Catherine Rundell soon because I really like the way she writes. She's so funny. And then after that, I read Baku and the Search for the Golden Cup by Zira Naurizbai and Lilia Kalaus, and it's translated from the original Russian by Shelley Fairweather Vega. So I have this kind of personal goal where every month I make it a point to read at least one nonfiction and one book from around the world. And for March, I wanted to pick a middle grade book from another country. And there weren't really as many options as I thought there would be, but after doing a lot of in depth research, I decided to pick this book from Kazakhstan. And it is written in Russian because it is one of the official languages of Kazakhstan. I wish it was written in Kazakh, but I guess to reach a broader audience throughout Central Asia, it's better is written in Russian, I guess. But this book was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. So if you're a fan of mythology inspired middle grade books, think Percy Jackson or Arusha, if you've read that. It's also very good. Yeah, Percy Jackson, everyone's heard of that. So imagine Percy Jackson in Kazakhstan. And it was just so awesome. Like, I want to film a separate video just praising this book, and I'm gonna be concise here because I could talk about this book for an entire day. And I have. I literally irritated my brother for an entire week talking about how great this book was. But yes, we basically follow our main character, Batu, who lives in Almaty, which is, it used to be a capital of Kazakhstan. it's currently Astana, but yeah, he lives in Almaty, which is towards the southeastern corner of the country. And one day, when he's just bored, I guess, he's sitting by the threshold of his house and he has his notebook out and he's talking to the illustration on it. And then this ancient Kazakh warrior just steps out of the notebook cover. And then he's whisked away on a quest by this warrior called Aspara to find this mythical item called the Golden Cup, which can supposedly restore harmony to the world. And yeah, this is the first book in a series, and the other two books are out. However, they haven't been translated yet. And at this point, if it doesn't get translated in the next 10 years, I swear I will learn Russian just to read the next two books. Like, that's how much I love this story. And there's so many parts of it that really resonated with me. There's this absolutely beautiful quote about internalized racism, which describes it so well. Like, the concept of internalized racism cannot be put any better than this one sentence, which I have to read to you because it's just so good. Like, everyone has to hear this. So here's the sentence. It's just so beautiful and like it resonated. I mean, I don't have internalized racism, but I think people who do, just listen to this. Who has hurt you so badly that you've stopped seeing and hearing the beauty of what your people can do? Like, literally, how perfect is that? But yeah, other than that absolutely fantastic quote, there's so much to it. I learned a lot about Kazakh culture and mythology. And I like how the mythology in this book was so strongly tied to actual history. So we have a lot about the Scythians. So if you have heard of Queen Tomiris, or Tumar as she is known in Kazakhstan, and about her tribe, the Mesagete, they're very important in this story. Aspara is also part of that tribe, and there's like a lot of cool stuff in it. And I really like the kind of metaphysical aspect of how standing on a threshold between two places is also synonymous with standing on the threshold of life and death, and also the threshold of like alternate dimensions. And that's how the traveling in this book really happens, by standing on a threshold and playing the traditional instrument known as a dombra. And I just really loved like the magic in this, the stuff going on, the relationships between all of these characters. Batu has a bunch of friends, I mean two of them, and then there are other characters too who have a lot of character growth. It was so fantastic, and it's such a short book. I mean, I guess it's standard size for middle grade. It's about like 250 to 60 pages, and so much happens. I would highly recommend it to people who like mythology inspired books, or I guess books with a lot of cultural tidbits sprinkled throughout. Absolutely excellent. After reading that, the next one I picked up physically was The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. And this one, again, is one of my brother's copies from school. And this one, just like A Wrinkle in Time, both of these books are similar because they're children's classics and they have both won the Newbery Medal. So they're like really acclaimed works. But I've got to say, I enjoyed The Phantom Tollbooth a lot more than A Wrinkle in Time. Maybe because this falls more in the fantasy genre as compared to Wrinkle in Time, which was very strongly sci-fi. And this one didn't have any weird religious overtones, which was great. In this book, we follow our main character, Milo, who is very bored. Like, he's very, like, he has a lot of ennui going on, and he doesn't see the point in anything, really. So one day he reaches back home from a really boring, pointless day at school, and he finds this package waiting for him in his room. And when he opens it, it's like a guide with an instruction manual to assemble this toll booth. So he got parts of a toll booth and then he assembled it, and then it says to go through the toll booth, and thus like a small coin that he gets to pay the toll. So he gets on his toy car and pedals across his room through the toll booth, and then all of a sudden he's no longer in his room on the other side, but instead on this like really beautiful winding road with lots of gorgeous scenery around him, and he has apparently been transported to a whole new realm. And on his journey there, he meets a lot of really interesting, quirky characters, like so many, dozens of them. And he goes to a lot of really fun places. So we have places like the Valley of Sound and the Forest of Sight, and this kingdom of words called Dictionopolis, and then a rival kingdom called Digitopolis, which values numbers more. And it was just a fantastic read with a lot of focus on the themes of the power of knowledge, the value of education, and how nothing you learn in school, even though it seems useless at the time, it is actually always relevant to your future. You'll find it vital to your future when you grow up, and how you have to cherish the education that you're being given and really be present in the moment and take nothing for granted. And this book reminded me of the Geronimo Stilton Kingdom of Fantasy series. If you have read that as a child, if you are the same age, then you've probably been exposed to that. It's massively popular. And I really loved that. I still do. I do read it even now, even though it's for 8-year-olds. But yeah, this book really felt like that. And I quite enjoyed that part of it. And because of all of these things, it was very solid 4 stars. The author is an architect, actually, and it's really fascinating because he says that he wrote this book to avoid writing this other serious architecture nonfiction book he had been commissioned to write, and then it went on to become a literal Newbery winner. Like, talk about fate. That is so cool. But yeah, The Phantom Tollbooth, definitely check it out. This one, I see why it's a classic, unlike A Wrinkle in Time. And then after that, I read Sisters by Raina Telgemeier. And this book is actually a graphic novel, a graphic memoir, actually, because this is part of this 3-book series that the author has written, which basically chronicles different parts of her childhood. And this book, from the title, it focuses on her relationship with her sister, which was quite complex growing up. There was a lot of love between them, but also a lot of jealousy and a bit of frustration, as with any sibling relationship. I would know. I have a brother whose age gap is very similar to the age gap between her and her sister. So, yeah, this book, I didn't expect that to happen, but it made me cry. And it's really difficult to make me cry, especially reading books. I think visual media tends to do it more, but with books, like, I only cry for very specific things, and that's usually pertaining to the demise of an elderly character. And this had none of that, but it still made me cry because in one section in the book where she goes to visit her cousins after not being there for many years, she's recounting how she felt so lonely because the other cousins that she had all grown up and they were kind of like excluding her, and she felt very left out of everything. She couldn't talk to the adults because they were busy talking about adult things, and then her older cousins wouldn't take her along, and then her youngest sibling, her brother, was just running around with like all the young kids, and then her sister wouldn't talk to her, and it was just like she didn't belong in any of these groups. And that really made me cry. That like overwhelming feeling of loneliness, I have felt that quite a lot of times. So yeah, that really resonated with me. And other than that, this was just, I really like the author's art style. I've read all of her books released so far, which is actually incredible, except the ones in the Babysitters Club graphic novel adaptation, because I haven't read the original books and I'm not very interested in that series either. But yeah, other than that, her like individual works, which aren't part of any adaptation franchise, I've read all of them and I've enjoyed all of them. So yeah, this was spectacular. I gave it 4.5 stars. There was this one section which really triggered my ophidiophobia though. Like, yeah, that actually, I couldn't read those pages because there was a tiny illustrated cartoon snake, and even that I couldn't handle. But other than that obvious discomfort, everything else was just, it was just really fun. Like, you should definitely check out this author's work if you can get your hands on it. I have managed to read all of her works from my library, which isn't known for a very great children's section, but somehow I have read them all, which is great. And then after that, I picked up Lodestar by Shannon Messenger, which is book 5 of the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. There's about 10 books released so far, and it's like a very, very popular middle grade fantasy series, and for good reason too. Like, I love that series. The only issue was that I read the fourth book, so the previous book, around 3.5 years ago, and when I picked this one up, I realized that I had forgotten just about everything. So I went online and searched the Wikipedia pages to kind of brush up on everything that I've forgotten, and I gave myself a terrible, severe spoiler that only is revealed in like book 9. So now, every time the characters involved in that spoiler interact, I'm like, oh god, I cannot unsee my spoiler. And now it's just annoying because I'm like, it's like now I can see all the foreshadowing and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh god, I swore I wouldn't do this to myself after accidentally doing the same thing with my favorite series of all time, Wings of Fire. But I've done it again, and I'm annoyed with myself. But other than that, this book was again absolutely incredible, just like all of the previous books in the series. We follow our main character, Sophie, who is a human, or so she thinks. She has eidetic memory, so photographic memory, and because of that, she is like in high school already, even though she's only 11 at the start of the series. And one day she sees something that is really bizarre, not of the ordinary. And then this boy appears and whisks her off to this completely different world. And it turns out she's in fact not a human. No surprises there. She is an elf. And do not imagine the Lord of the Rings elves. These elves look very similar to humans, and their ears only become pointed once they reach like a really old age, like 500 or maybe 1,000 years or something. But yeah, other than that, they look exactly like humans. They're all very like beautiful and without blemish, obviously. But other than that, humanoid. Okay, and she gets basically adopted by this elf family, and she gets embroiled in this kind of not exactly rebellion but kind of secret organization who have their own ulterior motives. And she is trying to figure out her own past. Where did she come from? There's a lot of stuff that gets revealed. I can't talk more about this because every single word could potentially be a spoiler, because I do not remember what is told in like the first book as compared to the rest of the books. Like, they're all getting mushed together in my head. I don't know which detail comes from which one, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone interested in picking it up. And I would strongly recommend it because all of the books are like 600 pages. They get thicker and thicker. And I love that. I love thick books. So if you're looking for a really meaty fantasy to sink your teeth into, but it's middle grade, so you don't have to sit through, I don't know, boring stuff that adult fantasy might have, then yeah, just pick this up. It's like a really expansive world. There's so many different species of creatures and the politics between them, lots of other like lesser creatures, the ones without sentience are there. Like, the main character's adoptive parents run this kind of animal sanctuary, and they have anatomically accurate dinosaurs. Their T-Rex has feathers. If that's not enough to convince you, what is? But yeah, definitely check this one out. The book that I read, the fifth one really delves deeper into the themes of the gray morality of rebellions, how even though you are trying to achieve like an overall good for society, throughout the things that you're doing, you're harming like plenty of innocent people, and it really examines that. It goes really deep for middle grade. But yeah, this is fun. Like, this series is just such a wonderful time. There are love triangles. Forget love triangles. There are love pentagons, hexagons. There's like a bunch of stuff going on. The characters do age through the books, so I think by the end of the series, they're all like adults, and it's kind of weird reading middle grade aimed for children, but the main characters are adults. But who knows? They're all kind of immature people, so I think they'll still read like 12-year-olds, even though they age physically. And that's Keeper of the Lost Cities, and it is popular for a reason. Do check it out. And after that, I read The Last Straw in the Diary of the Wimpy Kid series. I think it's book 3 by Jeff Kinney, and everyone has read at least one Diary of the Wimpy Kid book in their life. People around my age, right? You've all read it. And I don't know what to say. Like, they're fine. I hated the first book when I reread it last year, but this one, I guess it had more depth to it. There's a little commentary on There's a little commentary on toxic masculinity, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's Diary of the Wimpy Kid. I remember a teacher of mine used to tell the class that Diary of the Wimpy Kid are books for people who don't like to read. And it's true. Like, why would you pick them up when there's better books out there? Like, I guess you can for a slight break, but people who think it's the greatest masterpiece of literature ever produced, what is wrong with you? I know you all are just like, I know the people who say that are 10, 12, but still there are better books geared towards that age than this slop. I hate the main character, Greg. He is so frustrating. But yeah, I'm gonna stop for now because really, what is there to say about Diary of the Wimpy Kid? And now moving on to April, finally, we can move on to the second part. And in April, I only read 5 books. Yeah, just 5 from the 13 I read the previous month. And these are all books that I read for the Aurelian Magical Readathon. If you haven't heard of it, it's hosted by this booktuber, Book Roast. And it's just absolutely wonderful. It's like a fantasy RPG kind of thing, Dungeons and Dragons-esque, and you create your own character and you go on quests throughout the year and in these major readathons in April and September. So we have the spring equinox and the autumn equinox. And the one I completed was the spring equinox. And yeah, I have made a whole video about my TBR explaining the books that I read in further detail there. I mean, before I read them, the plots and all. So if you want a better plot summary, go for that, because right now I am not coherent at all. I know. But yeah, let's just go into my wrap-ups for those books that I read. So firstly, I read Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. And this book, it used to be very popular when it came out. It was all over BookTube in 2018, around that time. And this is the author's debut work. And we follow our main character, Yadriel, who comes from a family of brujos. So basically, magic users. And he is a trans boy and he feels very excluded from his community because their magic is extremely gendered, and because they don't really see him as a brujo, he's not allowed to do this particular ceremony that will enable him to access powers from their patron god, the Lady of Death, Nikte. And yeah, so he is not a fan of that, obviously, so he just does the ceremony anyway to prove them all wrong, to show them that he is in fact a real brujo. And he does succeed at the first part of the ceremony, but then to complete it, he has to summon a ghost and then free it and send it to the underworld, because that's what the brujos do. And he partially succeeds at that too, except he was trying to summon the ghost of his cousin, but instead he gets this ghost of this boy who goes to his school apparently, and the guy Julian who he summons is clearly not happy about finding out that he's dead. He refuses to believe it and he refuses to go to the underworld. So now Yadriel is stuck with this grumpy Julian, who's kind of, he has a reputation for being the bad boy of the school. But yeah, so they have to team up to figure out how Julian died so that he will make his peace with his death and actually pass on. And also, along the way, they get embroiled in this kind of murder mystery investigation where a bunch of young people are going missing. And yeah, things don't seem right. So that's Cemetery Boys, the plot. And I liked it. So I really enjoyed it at the beginning because I thought I would hate Julian because I don't like bad boy characters, but he was actually a really sweet and nice kid. The whole bad boy thing is just rumors that are being spread. And I liked their dynamic, Yadriel and Julian, and it does develop into a romantic relationship, but that's when I stopped liking it because they have known each other for all of 2 days. This book happens across 2 to 3 days, and then already they're like professing their love for each other. And I'm like, come on now. You've known each other for less than 48 hours. What is wrong with you? But I don't read books for romance. I have been known to be a certified romance hater all my life, so it's really no surprise. I think many people would find it enjoyable. It just doesn't make logical sense to me. But the plot itself was really great and it was a little predictable. I did see the twist coming like literally from page 30. when the certain things were already introduced that would be relevant to the twist later on, I was like, oh, come on, this is literally what's gonna happen. And yeah, that's obviously what happened. But it is YA, and I guess they're known for being a bit predictable. I am still at the target demographic for YA books, so maybe I shouldn't be finding them predictable. Who knows? It was alright. I think I haven't rated these 5 books yet. At least I haven't written any reviews yet. So now I'm just staring at a blank page in case you thought I was actually going to see something deep from my notes. But I think I'll give it 3.75 stars because certain things towards the end kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, yeah, not Yadriel. Julian becomes super protective of Yadriel all of a sudden from his own family who he has already reconciled with. So I'm like, I didn't like that. Like, you have known him for 2 days, I've known him all his life. So that was frustrating and irritating. I wanted to punch someone. But other than that, if you can look past a lot of YA stuff that goes hand in hand with this age range, I guess you would find it cool. I liked the inclusion of Dia de los Muertos and a lot of the Latino culture in this book. I really love reading books which draws inspiration from very diverse cultures and mythologies, and there was a lot of that in this. I have read some reviews from Latino reviewers online saying how they didn't like how the author mashed up a lot of different cultures into this one whole like mishmash. So a particular character would be speaking in a certain dialect of Spanish from a certain country, wearing clothes from another country, and then using artifacts from like a completely third different culture. So I agree that is extremely frustrating and annoying, and I don't know why a Latino author like Aiden Thomas would do that. Isn't that being disrespectful to their culture? But oh well, whatever. This book actually has a sequel coming out this year. I don't know how, but because the story ends very properly, like a standalone. But I might read it. I don't know. I thought it was good. Again, as I said, 3.75 stars. Definitely check it out for more diverse books. Okay, I'm gonna speed up a lot, because it's already been like, what, 50 minutes since filming, and I'm still 4 books away. Next book I picked up was actually for the book club pick for my guild. So in this readathon, in this like world that we have, there are 4 different guilds or like houses. And my guild, the House of the Arcane, our pick for the readathon book club was Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. Yes, that M.L. Wang, the very famous author of Sword of Kaigen. So her recent release, that is Blood Over Brighthaven. And it was actually so excellent. Like, I loved it. It wasn't what I was expecting, because Sword of Kaigen is very heavily influenced by Japanese mythology, and it has like an East Asian inspired setting. So I was expecting Blood Over Brighthaven to be similar. But then I read it, and as I started reading it, it was very much not. Very like Victorian England steampunk coded. So we follow our main character, Siona, or Siona, however you want to pronounce it, who lives in this walled city called Tiran, and that is the last bastion of humanity in this world, which has been ravaged by this kind of mysterious plague called the blight. Whoever the blight touches, well, whatever, any life form that it touches will just shrivel away. Like, it will shed layers of its, things that make it up, like the skin, then the muscle, then the bones will all just like unpeel from the like body, and they'll die. And also, along with this really terrible blight, they also have to deal with extremely harsh winter. So those who live in the city of Tiran are the ones who are able to lead a normal life, and everyone outside just struggles against these harsh conditions. And our other main character, Tomil, is from one of the tribes that inhabit the area outside Tiran, which is called the Quen. So at the beginning of the book, we see a chapter from Tomil's POV where he makes it to the city of Tiran, but on the way, everyone else in his tribe gets killed other than his niece. And now he has to build a life for himself within the city. And then we shift POVs to Siona, whose only goal in life is to become a part of the mages council of her city. So essentially, she wants to be an archmage, and so she sits the exam and passes it, becoming the first female archmage in the history of Tehran. And this world is very misogynistic and also racist towards non-Tiranese people. So all these Quen immigrants who come into the city, they're like super racist towards. And throughout the story, we follow Siona, who has to deal with being the only female archmage at her site of employment, and who has to deal with a lot of just stupid sexist comments from her colleagues. And then, as a joke, they, instead of giving her a proper research assistant, she gets like saddled with Tomil, who works as a janitor at like the Major's council building. And that turns out to be a blessing in disguise because Tomil is very intelligent and he's able to kind of help Siona find out some really startling discoveries that kind of upends her world. And yeah, that just sets into motion the events of the rest of the book, which are truly horrifying. I don't quite know how to talk about this without spoiling the book because the startling discovery comes at about 25% to 30%, and the rest of the book is grappling with that. And it takes a very realistic approach because a lot of time when this happens in fantasy books, it's very idealistic. And this was like brutally realistic down to its ending, which was just so painfully devastating. I was like, did the author actually go there? Yeah, she went there. She was not afraid to end the book how it should have ended instead of making it very unrealistically sappy and optimistic. And it was brutal, but it was also perfect. And for that reason, I have to give it 4.5 stars. It isn't quite a 5 star because for me, 5 stars is like a gut feeling, like how I felt with Lockwood and Co. This doesn't give me that gut feeling of like a perfect 5 star book, but it is certainly a stellar work of literature, and I would highly recommend everyone to check it out, especially if you're a fan of very interesting magic systems. The magic system in this felt like programming, like code. Like that was so cool. And I loved Siona as a main character because even though she says a lot of ignorant things, she has internalized misogyny and does commit microaggressions against Thomil. She does redeem herself by the end of the book, and it's really cool being in the head of like a person who is low-key racist and seeing their slow realization that what they're saying is wrong and seeing like their growth. And the conversations she has with other people was also so fun to like read. I was reading it like I have never read dialogue as fast as I read it in this book. Like I just had to like blaze my way through it. It was that captivating. But yeah, that is Blood Over Brighthaven. Highly recommend. Do check it out. After that, I read my next book, which was Welcome to the Hyunamdong Bookshop by Hang Borum and translated by Shana Tan. And this book, everyone who is on bookish social media would have seen it by now. It became very widely popular as part of this kind of healing fiction genre, as it's called in South Korea and even Japan. It's very like mundane, everyday things, but we follow our main character. What's her name? Yongjo. So we follow our main character Yongjo, who used to be like a very cutthroat corporate executive, but then she got burnt out from her work in the corporate world and desperately needs to take a break from it. So she quits her job and she moves to this neighborhood called Hyunamdong and she opens a bookshop there, which was her lifelong dream. And yeah, this book just deals with how she tries to open a business venture for herself, the people that she meets, the customers that come to the bookshop, her employees, just a lot of the daily workings of a bookshop. And it does go into a lot of the logistics behind doing it. It's not all cupcakes and rainbows and sunshine as you might expect. It is really difficult because, yeah, this is a capitalistic world and bookshops are a part of that too. And sometimes you have to sacrifice your values to survive. And yeah, this book, despite it being healing fiction, this scared me. Yeah, this book, this super cozy, comforting, lovely, light-hearted read scared me. And that's because it deals with the job market and working and adulting and stuff that the characters were really struggling with and continue to struggle with at certain sections of this book. It really hit me because I mean, I have just graduated from school and I'm already terrified of being an adult. And this book just kind of it gave me fears I didn't know I had. And I was like, how am I going to succeed? Because there's this one character, one of her employees, who throughout his life, since like his school days, throughout university, even after that, he has worked himself to the bone. And despite all of the effort and hard work that he poured into it, despite how excellently he did in school and university, none of it mattered because he did not get hired, no matter the hundreds of interviews that he kept attending, and eventually he just gave up. So I'm like, could that be me? So, as I said, scary, very existential stuff here, at least for me. Because I haven't really ever considered a scenario where I won't get hired. In my head, I'm like, I do well in school, I do well in university. Then I just walk over, then the first employer I hand my resume will be like, oh, welcome to the company. But that is extremely naive and idealistic, and this book definitely rocked my worldview. But other than that, I really enjoyed the writing style. Some people complain that they don't like the translation, but I think the translation was truly excellent. Yeah, you have to get used to reading translated books. I guess they do have a slight tonal shift from typically Western published English books, but I think it was still really lovely. And I liked all of our main characters, and I thought their dynamics with each other were all super interesting. So many beautiful friendships are formed throughout this book, and it was just great. And the author has two other essay collections. Unfortunately, I don't think they're translated, and even if they are, I'm not able to find them. But the translator, Shana Tan, has also translated this other book, the Yeonnam-dong Smiley Laundromat, I think it's called. And I'll definitely be checking it out because I do like the writing style of this book, and a lot of that is the translation, right? So I'm gonna check out Shanatan's other translation. But yeah, this is a very solid 4-star read. Very excellent, would recommend it to people who just want to take a break from their hectic life and just sit down and read a book about the magic of books and reading and literature. And moving on to my second last book. Okay, I'm gonna make this real quick. So I read Dragon Fruit by Makia Lucia, and it was absolutely fantastic. I read so many good books these past 2 months, but that was kind of soured by the final book that I read, which I'll get to. But before that, Dragon Fruit. How do I explain this? It's based on Polynesian mythology and culture. We follow our main character, Hanale, who lives on this island called Tamarind, up until the point where she gets poisoned and lands in a comatose position. So her father steals a dragon fruit, which in this world is basically the egg of a sea dragon. Yes, there are sea dragons in this world who are really cool and also actually terrifying and eat people and sink ships, but they're still cool. When she got poisoned, she was also poisoned with the heir to the throne because she was the page to the crown princess. And the dragon fruit, which was meant to be reserved for the princess, was stolen by her father to cure her. And so he essentially self-exiles himself from the island because if he's caught, he'll probably get a death sentence. So she grows up away from the island, and after the death of her father, she basically just roams the sea, the Nomi Nomi, which surrounds the archipelago where they live, and the neighboring archipelagos and nations. It's like very inspired by Pacific Islander geography too. But one day, due to an encounter with a sea dragon, Hanale somehow ends up back on the island of Tamarind, where she encounters her childhood best friend, Sam. That is the short form of his name. His name is like 10 syllables, which I do not remember. But yes, her childhood best friend, who is the son of the crown princess, and he is dealing with his own issues because his grandmother, who is a ruler of the island, is growing very old, and because he is a boy, he cannot inherit the throne cause, matriarchal system on the island of Tamarind. So he needs to find out a way to wake his mother, or he'll have to like marry some rando princess and hopefully have a daughter who can become the next heir to the throne. But yeah, so they both meet, and then they kind of have to work together to find a sea dragon egg, essentially. And this book had a beautiful, beautiful atmosphere, so diverse, so unlike anything I have ever read before. And that's the thing, when you read a lot of tropey, trash YA fantasy, which are extremely Eurocentric, you kind of get so burnt out and tired that you forget there's a whole world of very new, refreshing books out there drawing inspiration from different cultures. And this book is definitely one, if you're just tired of typical YA fantasy, go pick up Dragon Fruit. It felt so open and so like free. I don't quite know how to explain it. If you watch the Netflix movie Sea Beast, it felt like that. Sea Beast and Moana, those were the vibes of this book. Because when you read the typical YA fantasy, it feels very like enclosed. It usually takes place in a crowded city or like the palace or like even woods. This was on the open ocean, on like the coast and islands and archipelagos, and it was just so free and so cool, and I loved it. Definitely check it out. And moving on to the final book of April, which I literally finished on the 30th of April, last book. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Yes, I read this absolutely terrible garbage book. I mean, I get why people hate it. I hated it too. I'm just gonna say it up front, 1 star. If this could get 0 stars, it would. This was terrible because this was so bland and stale and boring. I will definitely be making a video detailing all the sins that this book has committed against literature. But for now, I have to be succinct and I'll just say this is like the most copy paste cookie cutter YA fantasy I have encountered in a really long while. It says that it's basically inspired by The Hunger Games and The Red Queen, those two very famous series. It wasn't inspired, it was outright cut out of that and stuck together in this like terrible mishmash Frankenstein's creature kind of thing. This was terrible. The writing was absolutely horrid. It was rife with unnecessary alliteration, lots of weird parallelism where the author thought that she was being clever, but it was just so bizarre and honestly just word salad. The conversations that the main character has with the other protagonist were so circuitous and it was just so terrible. You know how people say that they only read dialogue? Well, in this book, I was only reading the prose. Like, I couldn't read the dialogue because it was so painful. I was like, my eyes are bleeding reading these cringy stuff. Okay, you know what? I'll just give a brief plot overview, but it's so damn popular, you probably have already heard of it. We follow our main character, Payden, who is living in this country called Ilya, where most of the people have powers, like special abilities, like you can control water, or you can, I don't know, walk through walls, turn invisible, teleport, stuff like that. But then she is an ordinary. She doesn't have any powers, and because of that, her life is in danger because every ordinary in this country is killed because the ruling government thinks it will weaken the power of the elites by spreading some kind of disease or whatever. So she lives in the slums and it's not a great life. She has incredible cold reading skills with which her dead father had trained her in, so she pretends to be a psychic, which isn't a real category of elite, but yeah, she gets away with it. And she goes around stealing stuff and making a living in the slums. One day she rescues the prince of the country, and that ends her up in these things called the Pershing trials, which are the Hunger Games like part of it, where the elites have to like compete in this kind of competition where the winner gets a lot of money and glory, I guess. And it doesn't have to be to the death, but teenagers, bloodlust, sometimes it is to the death. So yeah, she gets caught up in that and she doesn't have powers, so she just has to survive using her own physical abilities and wit. And along the way, she develops a romance with the prince that she saves, and it's so cringe and trashy and tropey, and I hated it. Like, why are stuff like this written? Like, why? So yeah, that was powerless. I can talk about a whole hour about why I hated this, but I'm just so tired. Like, I already spent all of yesterday writing a scathing review on Goodreads about how terrible this drivel was, and I don't have it in me to like spew that again. So I guess I'm gonna wait for like a week or two and then post a full length review on why you should stay away from this book and why the publishing industry is insane and people who gobble this up, they really don't have any discerning sense in literature because this is objectively bad. If you're just looking for really trashy romantasy, I guess this can scratch that itch. But really, the tropes that it lists at the back, the whole enemies to lovers, slow burn thing, that's just lying. It's just straight up lying. None of that happens. So Yeah, if you have read this and enjoyed it, good for you. But to me, this was like the anathema to what I think good literature should stand for. So yeah, powerless. 1 star, 0 star, negative infinity stars. That. And now, just for a slight section of all the books that I'm currently in the middle of, I won't go into the plots of this, just tell you what I'm reading. So, after reading Powerless, I always like to have a physical book and a digital book on the go. So, I picked up Solomon's Crown by Natasha Siegel. This is basically medieval England historical fiction with a romance between Richard Lionheart, the King of England at that time, and Philip, the King of France. And I like the writing so far. After reading Powerless, any writing will feel like absolute literary gold. So, yeah, that's that. And I'm also reading this nonfiction book about the sense of smell called Nosedive. And that's absolutely fascinating. I'm really loving learning more about the chemistry of how smells are perceived by our olfactory bulb, and it's great. And I'm also reading my middle grade book of the month, which is Zachary Ing and the Dragon Emperor by Siran J. Zhao, and that's just awesome. It's like Batu and the Search for the Golden Cup level of awesome. Well, maybe not that much, but still, it's definitely going to be a 5 star read. It's like Chinese mythology meets Yu-Gi-Oh meets Percy Jackson is how it's advertised, and it's fantastic. Definitely go check that out. And yeah, that's about it. That's all for now. And I know this video has been incredibly long already. I'll edit it down to like a more manageable length. But if not, I'm so glad if you made it all the way here. I hope you had a lovely reading month and that May will be kinder to you and you do not pick up anything like Powerless and things that are more like Lockwood and Co. or Batu and the Search for the Golden Cup. And yeah, that's all from me. I hope to catch you in my next video, whenever that may be. Until next time, 再见。